For someone who just said 20 minutes ago that I'm not super into YA anymore, I'm sure talking a lot about YA series. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today we're going to talk about series that I am continuing on in, as well as series that I have DNF'd. I've seen quite a few of my booktube friends do videos on kind of series updates. Recently, Jess Owens did a video on series that she's DNF'd. I figured I'd just bring them both together and talk about just kind of series in general. So since I've started tracking my reading in 2019, I've obviously started quite a few series, continuing a few series, DNF'd a few series. So I'm going to start with the DNFs. Again, starting from 2019 because I don't exactly remember everything I read before that. But before I jump into it, please consider liking and commenting on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. So these DNFs are in mostly chronological order of when I read them, and we are going to start with Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. And I read Annihilation early 2019, like around when the movie was coming out, and it's just too weird. I finished the book. It's just too weird. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand anything. It's too weird for me. I won't be continuing on. The next one is Ninth House. This one I just didn't really connect with the main character. I just didn't find her all that compelling. I thought the whole thing felt a little pretentious, especially when it came to Leigh Bardugo describing Yale, and I didn't enjoy this one. Although I think a lot of people felt this way. I think Ninth House is either you love it or you hate it, and I unfortunately fall into the latter camp. But I love this cover. It's a beautiful cover, just not for me. Next we have Goddess in the Machine. Again, beautiful cover. I freaking love this cover, which was a big part of the reason I picked it up. And I think this is going to be kind of a reoccurring theme with some of my recent DNFs, but I'm just not super into YA anymore. It just doesn't appeal to me the way it used to, which makes sense because I am no longer a young adult. So that'll be kind of a reoccurring theme with some of these DNF series. I can reread YA I read as a kid, but just continuing on with YA. And the main thing about this one is it's just freaking boring. Like, there's just nothing happening. It's really, really boring. Continuing in that YA theme is To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I actually really did enjoy reading this one, but it's just not something I really see myself prioritizing finishing this series and continuing on. There's so many books out there that I would like to get read, and I just don't really find myself wanting to jump back into this series, even though I really did enjoy this one in particular. So this next one is one I really, really thought I was gonna love. It is a detective mystery murder. Normally something I'm pretty into, but I was not into Into the Woods by Tana something. Pretty sure I unhauled it. But I read this for the Shelf This Book Club. I'm glad that I'm in the Shelf This Book Club, but a couple of the entries on this list will be due to the Shelf This Book Club. And that is just because a big part of that book club is that the host rotates every month, and so we're opening ourselves up to a bunch of new genres and a bunch of new authors, but this one just didn't do it for me. Again, it was just very boring.
You're boring.
Like, if I'm going to read a murder mystery thing, I don't want to actually follow through the steps of a legitimate investigation. If I wanted to do that, I would become a cop. Also, this one being a series, the main character is kind of a big enigma, and they keep referring to it throughout the whole book, but they don't really give you any of his background. And another one of my series that I've been reading that I'll talk about later does this same kind of thing where, you know, the main detective is a very kind of elusive, enigmatic character, but for some reason it doesn't bug me there, and I think it's because the actual mystery of the story is compelling enough that I don't mind that we're holding the cards close to the vest for the actual detective themselves. But with this one, I needed more. I needed something. I was bored to tears almost the entire time. Again, another Shelf This Book Club pick, Where Dreams Descend. And I think, like I'd mentioned, it is YA. It's not doing it for me. anymore. And it wasn't a bad read the way, like, I wasn't bored, but I wasn't particularly intrigued. And I think like a really good way to explain it is that it ends on a kind of cliffhanger, but I just didn't care enough about any of the characters to want to do that. The next series I am DNFing, I actually still have the first book, and that is Dune, which I think a lot of people could probably agree with me on this, that like, yes, I read Dune, yes, I am glad I read it. It is a hallmark of modern sci-fi, but I don't have the brain capacity to continue on with this series. The main reason I read this is to appreciate more modern sci-fi, so to understand the references of more modern sci-fi, so I just don't really need to continue on in this series. Dune is enough for me to get that taste of what modern sci-fi is kind of based on, and I don't need any more of this because I feel like all of the things that are good about this are better in other sci-fi stories, and that is because standing on the shoulders of giants, Frank Herbert did kind of revolutionize a lot of sci-fi, but I got the basic understanding from this, and now I can go on and have some spicier variations of sci-fi. I don't need the basic bechamel sauce anymore. This is the last time. I know last time I talked about this book, I said it was the last time, but this is actually the last time. And that is Daughter of Sparta. I've talked about it many times on my channel about how much I don't like it and how disappointed I am, and it's bad. But again, it is YA, and it is written for a very different audience than me. Had 14-year-old Adriana read this, she would have been obsessed. And it's part of the reason I'm really scared to reread some of my YA on this shelf, besides Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson is perfect. I will reread that till the day I die. But some of the other like kind of children's and YA I have on my Greek mythology shelf, I'm very nervous to read them because I feel like they kind of fall into this same trope of like girl bossing Greek mythology. And it's definitely something I would need a nostalgia factor with that book to be able to enjoy the yassification of Greek mythology. The last series that I have started since 2019 and am choosing not to continue is again The Magic. Again, another shelf this book club pick, but I did not like this book. I found this book pretty enjoyable. I think I gave it like a 3.5. Like, it is a enjoyable book that is fine. It is a Regency era romance, and I think Regency era romances are just not for me. So let's shake off all that negativity and we are going to now jump into series I am in the middle of or caught up with or need to catch up with. This list is not in any order at all. So we'll start with my absolute favorite series, and that is Sigma Force. You can kind of see it on maybe the edge here, but I got like shelves, like multiple shelves dedicated to that. And it is by far, like I said, my absolute favorite series. It is really unique in the way it blends sci-fi and historical mysteries and espionage. So I've described this series on my channel before as scientists with guns. They are a specialized military force through DARPA, who all have like PhD level knowledge in some specific aspect of science, and they use that to help them solve global crises. The most recent one had to do with a global pandemic. One before that had to do with ancient weapons of mass destruction. There we go. Another one was an AI trying to take over the world. Another Contagion, I think, maybe. I don't know. There's always some crazy global crisis that has to do with some cutting edge form of science, as well as being linked back to a historical mystery, and I love it. As a science nerd and as a history nerd, it's so good. Plus, overlaced over the whole top of it is an adventure thriller with spies, and I love it. It's so good. I am fully caught up on this series so far. There are 16 in the mainline series. There are a couple offshoots that I'm not caught up with, but I'm mostly interested in the mainline series. So I'm all caught up with that. The next one is another long-running series, and that I've also talked about a couple of times on my channel, but that is the Pendergast series. So this is a detective thriller series that has been going on since the 90s. I've read the first 3 in the official mainline Pendergast series. That is Relic, Reliquary, and Cabinet of Curiosities. So far, these ones have been murder mysteries involving the New York Natural History Museum, and they have to be solved by this eccentric detective from Louisiana living his life. It's kind of like Knives Out, but like higher stakes. Like, I don't know, like the detective Daniel Craig from Knives Out reminds me a lot of Detective Pendergast, but kind of like that whole like Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes kind of vibe, but lots of crazy things. And the 3 I've read so far have kind of done that mix of like historical mystery, science combination. Something I love, something I will always be a sucker for. Give me some history, give me some science. I'm good to go. An offshoot of that Pendergast series is the Nora Kelly series, and I've talked about this on my channel as well. It starts, I don't know how to describe it best. Starts with Thunderhead, which is by the same authors of the Pendergast series, obviously, but was a standalone book that didn't really involve Pendergast at all. And then I think they ended up really liking the main character of Thunderhead here, that they put her into the 3rd book of the Pendergast series. So this Thunderhead is like 0.5 in Nora Kelly. Cabinet of Curiosities is like 0.75 in the Nora Kelly series. And then the actual first book is right here, Old Bones. So I actually read Old Bones first because my dad gave it to me. I didn't super love it, but then when I went back and read the other 2 Nora Kellys, I enjoyed it a lot. And I read the second book, The Scorpion's Tale. I have a review of that on my channel. And now I just need to read the 3rd book that is out currently. I think it came out in like February, and that is on my TBR. I really want to get to it soon, so I will be caught up in this series very, very soon. I don't know if I've described this series. This is an archaeologist who again is kind of involved in the larger Pendergast universe, but then as an offshoot, she and another side character from the Pendergast series who comes along later in the series than I've read, but is an FBI agent, they kind of work together to solve crimes in the American Southwest. The next series I want to read is, I think it's called the Chronicles of Ixia, the Poison Study series. So I read Poison Study, it was like right when I was starting my channel, so like 2020-ish, early 2020-ish, and really enjoyed it and had the best intentions of continuing on with the series, but the 2nd and 3rd books, I think there might be 5. Either way, the 2nd and 3rd books weren't available from my library, so I just kind of kept putting it off, and then I just kind of kept putting it off, and I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time with that book, and I want to finish it someday. I will do it someday. This focuses on a young-ish girl who gets thrown in prison for kind of a somewhat bogus reason, and gets the opportunity to become the king's food tester instead of being put to death. So obviously she takes the food tester thing and gets trained up by the king's right-hand man, and I think it's involved in kind of like a political resistance at some point. I don't know, it's been so long since I read this, but I really enjoyed it. Shifting gears a little bit into romance, a series I would like to try to finish at some point is the Brown Sisters series. So I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, again 2020-ish time frame, and I didn't love it. Like, I had an enjoyable time with it, but I wasn't really planning on going on with the series. I've heard enough people who didn't love the first book say that they really enjoyed the next 2 that I am more interested in continuing on with the series. I am planning on finishing out the next Brown Sisters books at some point. This is another one that I would like to finish at some point, but isn't super high on my priority list, but that is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. This is another one where I didn't love the first book, but I've heard enough people say that the second book is a lot better that I'm willing to give it another chance. Next up is the Inheritance games. So this is actually a YA that I am really excited about and really want to finish out the series. I have the second book, but I am kind of waiting for the third book to come out so I can just kind of binge them right in a row. go, because I've heard from a couple different people that the second book is a little bit of a slog. So I'm thinking that's probably just like a sophomore slump. If we can push through and if I can just, read the second and third right in a row, hopefully that'll make it a little bit better, because I really, really did enjoy the first book. I thought the first book was so fun and just crazy and a good time. Another YA, the Tokyo Ever After series. I read the first one, Tokyo Ever After. Cannot remember what the second one is called off the top of my head. I don't know if this is going to be a trilogy or a duology, but basically this is a Princess Diaries type story where a young girl in California discovers that her dad is the Prince of Japan, so she gets kind of whisked over to Japan to kind of go through the rigmarole of royal life and falls in love with her bodyguard. And I don't really think by the end of the first book we really got any sort of wrap up with that. So I am really excited. I think it's going to be super fun, it's super cute, and I want to read it soon. I don't know if it's out yet. It might still be coming out. Yeah, I don't think the second book is out yet, which is why I haven't read it. And another YA. For someone who just said 20 minutes ago that I'm not super into YA anymore, I'm sure talking a lot about YA series that I want to keep reading. But that is This Poison Heart. I think the second book is gonna be even better than the first. So This Poison Heart, it feels very tropey at first. This young adopted girl discovers that her birth parents were super rich, and she gets left with this huge estate, and it turns out she has magic plant powers, and also poison doesn't affect her. She goes back to this big estate with her and her mom's, and they kind of discover that her birth family might have some kind of weirdness going on, and it's got kind of a Greek mythology tie-in, so obviously I'm a sucker for that. The way the first book left off, I think the second book is gonna be a time. Okay, I think this is the last YA series on this list, but that is Six Crimson Cranes. I really enjoyed the first one. I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy the second one, but I think it's just supposed to be a duology, so it shouldn't if I read the first one, might as well give the second one a chance, especially since I did enjoy the first one, and see what happens. So this next series is actually written by the same author as my absolute favorite series, The Sigma Force, and he wrote a fantasy series, or I guess wrote the start of a fantasy series, The Starless Crown. It is part of the Moonfall series. It is an epic fantasy following a young student who, after a traumatic experience, reveals a prophecy that the moon will fall into the earth. So it is a wide cast of characters having to figure out how to make this not happen. I really enjoyed the first one. Don't know what kind of schedule he's on with this series. Hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on the next one very soon. So this next one is another romance series, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I read the first one, really enjoyed it. I don't know how much of an actual series this is going to be, because it sounds like the next one, Love on the Brain, isn't even really taking place at the same university, so this might just be totally different characters, but with kind of a similar vibe. I know that Ali Hazelwood also wrote a couple short stories, so I might try to track those down as well. I don't know if they're part of this same kind of companion series or not, but I do have an arc for Love on the Brain, so I am planning on reading that at some point. The next one is kind of another mystery thriller, and that is the Wayward Pines series by Blake Crouch. I read Pines a couple months ago, and I read it so fast. I mean, it is a pretty short book. It's only 300 pages, but I zipped through it so quick, so engaging, so cool. I really hope the next two hold up, but I think they will. I was having kind of a hard time tracking them down, but I do have the next two, and I am planning on reading them soon. Next, we have The Legacy of Orisha. I don't know if that's how you say it, but Children of Blood and Bone, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, that series. There is apparently a plan to come out with a third book, but the author is also involved in a project to adapt the first book to film. Who knows if and when we'll get the third book. The second book was kind of disappointing. It also left us hanging on a huge cliffhanger, so I would love for the third book to just come out and wow me, because I would really like to redeem this series. Next up is another romance series, and that is the American Royals series. I read the first one, very much enjoyed it, had the best intentions of continuing on with the series, and then just got distracted by other things. This might be another one where I just pick up the rest of the series and just binge it all at one time, because I think the last book in the trilogy is coming out soon. You know, I could just pick them all up, binge them, call it a day. That might be the way I end up going about this. And finally, ending on another romance series, but that is the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. I thought this was going to be a standalone. Turns out the author is writing another book coming up here soon, so I think it's going to be kind of a companion series. The next one is focusing on like the cousin of the main character from this one. So I think that'll be fun. I think the world the author set up was super fun and cute and cozy, and just a very good like Halloween themed romance. Witchy, it's fun. So I'm really excited to pick that up again. I think the next one is coming out in September, so that'll be perfect in time for me to read it for Halloween. So those are all the series I have DNF'd / I am continuing on with. Let me know how many series you've either DNF'd or are in the middle of or are caught up with, if you're a better person than me and actually continue on with series instead of just abandoning them at the first book. And thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.